What's up YouTube? Today I want to talk about the Arturia Keystep Pro and a couple of reasons why I think it's the perfect sequencer slash hardware controller for my Eurorack performance setup. Let's dive in and have a look. So just a quick disclaimer, Arturia did actually send me this beast for the purpose of this tutorial, but they're not altering my decision in any way. I don't have to send them this video before I actually publish it or anything, so there's no way that they can kind of alter my decisions or my sort of impression of the product. And just on a side note, they did actually just say, you know, what do you want? They were like, you know, we would like for you to do more reviews and more stuff with our hardware stuff. What do you want? And I actually chose the Keystep Pro because I've been looking for something exactly like this, that I can create sequences and all sorts of things for my Eurorack setup. It's also really cool in terms of generating melodies and all sorts of things. It does have traditional MIDI USB, so you don't have to necessarily use it in a Eurorack setup. You can potentially use it, you know, with your VSTs. You can potentially use it with any hardware synth. So why did I choose the Keystep Pro in particular for my sequencing? So there's various things that I've kind of been looking for in the Eurorack world, with most particularly was doing a retrigger effect, you know, to create fills and stuff at the end of bars. It turns out that that particular effect is pretty hard to do. I could only find like one module that actually does that. And, you know, when I found out that you could actually do that with the MIDI, you know, I thought that was pretty cool because you could still change, for example, like certain parameters with the synth so that it just triggers the MIDI and you get like a MIDI fill, but you can still alter the actual sound itself. So it's a bit different, but it's still pretty cool. So you've got these push buttons. They're not really buttons. It's kind of like a touch strip along the side here. And that does your kind of like retrigger effects, which is really, really cool while you're performing live sets and stuff. Another major reason why I chose this one is that you can save projects. So it's basically a 4-channel sequencer. Each of the channels, I think, has up to 16 patterns, which you can chain together in various different interesting ways to create, you know, longer sequences. And then each of those kind of 4-channel sequencer kind of projects can be saved and recalled at a later stage. So this is particularly interesting because I could write entire tracks, or at least just like the melodies and the rhythms and stuff for the tracks, just using the Keystep Pro itself, and then just plug it in different ways and patch different things to kind of get different outcomes every time. So I think that's particularly interesting. The whole projects, patterns, sequencing thing is really, really cool. So the build quality is actually a little bit more sturdy than I had originally thought. I think it's a little bit better in terms of the quality of something like the Keystep Pro's original keysteps and stuff like that. It seems like the quality of this unit is a little bit of a step up. So I was pretty surprised to see that it's pretty well constructed. The only con I really have for the thing is the mini keys. For me, that's not a huge issue. I mean, I'm not a pianist, I'm not a pro keyboard player or anything like that. So the mini keys kind of suit my workflow. You know, you kind of squeeze more into smaller space. So it's kind of a little bit more efficient. So some of the pros are that I think with some of the previous models within the Arturia range, they didn't have an actual power supply input. They kind of used USB power and all sorts of funny things like that, which I'm not a huge fan of. I personally do prefer units when they actually have a power supply. I just find that's a lot more reliable. Sometimes with the USB sockets, they could like unplug and all sorts of things, and you know, it's just a nightmare. If you're like mid-performance and your main controller stops working, yeah, you're in trouble. So the other thing that's really cool about this is the huge variety of inputs and outputs. So you've got 2 hardware MIDI outputs, you've got USB, and then you've also got 4 actual CV gate and modulation outputs, and then 8 drum gate outputs, which you could use for, you know, sequencing the first channel using actual drum outputs and stuff. But I'll show you guys various different ways of routing it and setting it up and playing with the thing. So the way it works and the way it's set up is incredibly intuitive as well. I mean, I didn't really have to do all that much manual diving to actually kind of first start playing with the unit. I literally just plugged it in, plugged some CV and gate inputs into the thing. There was a little bit of things that I had to double check in the manual just to check like how the project saving system works and all that kind of thing. But again, just the way that it works is super intuitive, and I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of videos and tutorials and stuff from probably myself included about how to actually use this thing in various different contexts. Let's see the different ways we could use to write melodies. So we could either just like trigger arpeggiators. So the cool thing about this is you could either use the hold mode and just kind of trigger a chord and let it kind of do its arpeggiator things. There's various different kind of sequence methods that you could use to arpeggiate. You could either use the traditional up or down. You can use order, which is like the order in which you punch the notes, which is pretty cool. So you can kind of do your own sequence using the arpeggiator. You can obviously get a little bit more technical with the actual sequencer per channel. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But then there's also a random, which is pretty cool for getting like random probabilistic style stuff. Just, you know, triggering a chord, letting it arpeggiate, and then randomly choosing which notes it's going to jump to. Check this out. You see, it's cool. We can even just like mute a sequence. So I particularly like this for shooting videos where I can quickly just mute stuff. I don't have to remember like where the volume is in my patch or anything like that. I can just mute and unmute, and it just makes things a little bit easier for explanations and stuff like that. So beside the point, we can change different arpeggiator modes. So let's check out the random now. So there, I've split the signal up. We can actually hear it because it's droning into the reverb. So I've split the signal up, so that same synth is basically running through into the mixer, into a delay, and then I'm feeding the same output just with a different filter. So the low pass filter is then feeding into the reverb, and that's creating that low drone, but that drone is still the same notes as the arpeggiator. So as the arpeggiator kind of like chooses random notes in that sequence that we've created, the drone kind of like, with that kind of like atmos and that pad, will always kind of correlate to the same note as that melody. So it's a nice way of being able to create these very kind of, very in-depth sounds that sound like lots of layers, but just using a single sequencer. So another reason why I think this is particularly cool and it fits into my kind of performance workflow is the ability to transpose all of the channels sequencing. So that saves one of my ornament and crime modules in my performance because I usually just use that entire module just for transposing things, sending voltages and stuff like that. So being able to do it while playing the melodies in just feels so much more intuitive because I can kind of see what notes I'm transposing to as opposed to just using kind of random voltage values. So that helps me to kind of remain musical while I'm creating these performances and while I'm kind of jamming and stuff. So check this out. At the moment, I think that the arp that I'm doing is in C minor. So what I could do is just kind of hold this transpose button and then just press the F. And then what it does is it transposes that arp into F minor. So that was a sequence that I had already prepared. What we can do is we can look at either, punching in notes to create our own sequence, or writing in the sequence using the record method, which is also pretty cool. We could also just randomly punch in notes and then use the randomization or the probability settings to kind of create our own kind of probabilistic melodies. I think that could work in this kind of more ambient context. Let's check this out. So what we could do is we could punch in extra notes here and then use this randomization or randomness parameter to actually choose how much probability that note is going to play. So we could use this to kind of create extra groove in our arrangement. And then you've also got this extend steps. So how this works is, let's say for example you've got 4 loops of this 16 and we want to play this first note on all of the loops, the third note on just the first and the third. This one we want to play on all of them. This one maybe just the last. So we can kind of get really like, almost probabilistic, but still very sequenced in the way that we kind of create these grooves. Check this out. Each of the sequences also has a modulation output or a velocity output, which you can kind of assign to anything in your rack using the actual CV outputs at the back here. So what I want to do is I want to send a cable from the CV or velocity/mod output of voice number 4. And we can send this into the morph input of that formant oscillator. Then this becomes the attenuator for that input. We can also choose the amount of velocity per step. Check this out. So channel 1 you can either use as an extra sequencer to sequence synths or anything like that, or you could also use it as a drum sequencer. So there's 8 drum gate outputs, which is pretty extensive. I only generally use like 4. But if it's in drum mode, you would press, okay, I'd have to go to track, and then each of these notes here selects like which channel you want to actually put the drum in on. So let's say, for example, kick there, snare there. Awesome. That's about it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments if you want more of this kind of hardware related stuff. I know it's slightly different to my usual, you know, just serum, vital tutorials and that kind of thing. If you do like the hardware stuff, let me know in the comments as well. And yeah, a big thanks to Arturia for sending me this unit for the purpose of this video. But again, like I said, they're not altering my decisions or my impression of the unit in any way. I actually picked it out. They said, what do you want? And I chose the Keystep Pro. So yeah, a big thanks to Arturia for sending me this unit. And yeah, if you liked the video, hit that like button. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing to my channel. See you guys next time. Cheers.